This is one of the most challenging books I have ever read. Now, I don't think you'll be surprised at all when I tell you that this is a masterpiece, when I tell you that Donna Tartt is a talented force to be reckoned with. But my god, was this a tough slog of a book to get through. And at first you might just think, oh, is it because of the length? You know, like it's a very chunky book. Sure, but there are plenty of fantasy books that you can it's a breeze. You know, they're hundreds and hundreds of pages long, but they don't feel that way. This book feels long. I finished The Goldfinch and it felt as if I had aged 10 years. You know, like it's taken its toll on me. And I just put the book down and I thought, like, oh no, if I step outside the house, has the earth flooded? Is the earth now being run by mutant fish people? Because that is how long I have spent reading this book. I had 2 weeks off for med school, 2 weeks, and I thought, oh, that's an ample amount of time to get through this, you know? Like, about 800 pages, I can do it. Didn't do it. Was on the train ride up to Scotland, desperately going through the last 100 pages of it, like, because it's it feels so much slower than it is. And I didn't expect that because The Secret History, her other book that I've read, is lightning in a bottle. It's so dynamic. I think that's because the characters in The Secret History are so much more arresting to the reader. You very much are in the same shoes as Richard, the main character in that book, where you are suddenly thrust into this friendship group and you really enjoy them. Like, you could make a whole religion out of Henry Windsor. Like, there's so much going on between every member of the group and their whole like exchange is really interesting. This book feels a lot more threadbare, a lot more true to real life. You know, The Secret History felt very like esoteric, like you were dealing with something that you had to read about because you were never going to experience it. This felt a lot more quotidian, a lot more down to earth. Like, oh, this is just a very based in reality, very tragic look at like a child's upbringing. I suppose if you really boil them down, they're kind of the same book. They're two very epic, dramatic books, each about a sad boy with a secret. Only in The Secret History, the secret is that this group of friends have turned on one of their own, and in The Goldfinch, the secret is the painting that he has kept. Because, spoiler alert, Charlotte dies at the end, and she gets to have her babies. No, that's the wrong book. Spoiler alert, his mum gets blown up. So there's like a terrorist attack at the art gallery. His mum gets blown up. It's very dramatic. And then his dad comes to take him, but his dad is, you know, not the most responsible father figure. And they go to Vegas because that's where the dad set up shop. And for about 200 to 300 pages, it is literally Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It's like, hey, do you want to take loads of drugs in the Nevada desert? Yeah, I want to take loads of drugs in the Nevada desert. That's what the book devolves into. And I wasn't mad at it, but there were definitely large stretches of this book where the speed was treacle. Like, you know, in Storygraph, when you're submitting a book review and it's like, what was the pacing of this book? This book was slow, slow, slow. Like, so unbelievably slow. I would spend hours and hours reading it, and then it would be like, how much progress have I made? Oh, about 50 pages. Right. I do think that makes sense though, because if I continue on this thread of comparing it to The Secret History, I think objectively this is a better book because it's more cerebral, it's more profound, it has so much to say about art and beauty that, I mean, the last 100 pages is basically just an essay, but not in like a soapboxy, boring lecture kind of way, in like a your favorite TED talk. You know, you're listening to Donna Tartt's internal dialogue about beauty and art, and it's very nihilistic as well, which, you know, spoke to me. Um, and so in that sense, I prefer it to The Secret History. But overall, if I was going back to one of them to reread, it would be The Secret History. I think that has more of like a story going on. A lot of this is just he's stolen a painting, and then, oh my god, and then very suddenly we find out he doesn't have the painting. His like best friend Boris took the painting and put like a decoy in its place because he's had this painting under his bed, like wrapped in like a pillowcase. And so Boris, his like Russian friend, fully swaps it out, and the book really drops that. You're like, oh, it was very like in The Secret History when you find out that the brother and sister are like have slept together, and it's like, oh, huh, you know, like sometimes Donna Tartt will just drop like a oh, and you're like, oh, I think we should have put more attention on that. Like what? Before going into this book, I had seen online through like book friends and stuff how polarizing the Goldfinch really was. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I can appreciate why that's the case because it is such a labour and a triumph to read this book. Like, if you're in the mood for something easy, this is not the pick at all because it's an experience and I'm so happy that I have read it. But if you're someone who's like, oh, you know, I'm just reading for pleasure, like maybe not this one because this one, you've got to put in the work. Like, unless you are just going to let it wash over you, you are going to, it's a thinker. You're going to be sitting up at night being like, huh, what's going on there? Which I do like, you know, I like a strong artistic choice. And this book, I can't, besides The Secret History, I can't mentally compare it to many other modern books that I've read. You know, this wasn't written that long ago, which feels weird because as far as books go, it doesn't feel very modern. So, pretty amazing. Like, if we're going objectively, like from a critic's POV, this is probably the best book I've read so far this year. Does that necessarily translate into enjoyment? No. There were definitely moments in this book where the tedium was really getting to me and I was like, okay, can we wrap this up? Can we wrap this up? As much as I'm sure we all wish Donna Tartt wrote more books because it's been like 30 years and she's only written 3 novels, it's one of those where you can see that each one is clearly a labour of love. And so I don't really resent her taking so much time in between writing them. Like, it's kind of boss the way that she can get everyone to fall at her feet with like such a tour de force of writing. Like, it's so like she can just drop this like it's nothing and it's like, oh, Pulitzer Prize. Like, yes, because it's whew, it floored me. Like, it's gonna take a while to get this out of my head, which I can't say about plenty of other modern zeitgeisty books. Random sidebar, but I liked that Theo Decker, our main character by the way, I like that he was a bit of a douche, but he wasn't an unreliable narrator. Because it is getting to a point where I feel like that's been done to death. You know, like an unreliable narrator, we've seen it, okay? I don't need necessarily for that to be every time we have like an anti-hero type main character. Because, you know, his moral compass was very intermittent. He does lots of shady stuff and then sort of gets up on his high horse and judges other people. But I liked that that's where it stayed, you know, like there was never too much judgment on Theo's character. Things never went in any like crazy dramatic direction. Like, I would say the denouement, the way that everything sort of resolved, it was nice, you know. There wasn't like an over the top final death or something really dramatic or poignant to end on. It was just like life. And for me, the mundanity of how it ended, I was like, oh, you know what? I feel you. You know, this is, I like what you're doing here. So I would say if you're in for an experience that is quite unique, but also quite edifying, not necessarily enjoyable, and you will definitely feel the mental toll of it, give the Goldfinch a go. It's oddly meta. Like, it feels as if you didn't read this book in your living room. It feels like you went into a modern art gallery and had to stare at it for 10 hours. Like, that's as much sense as I can make of it.